right. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome all of you to this year's League of Women Voters of Janesville's fourth annual Earth Week Forum. It is entitled Creating an Inclusive and Equitable Process for Building Sustainable Communities. And we have a wonderful panel with us today, so you're in for a real treat. Tonight's programs, we start a bit late, but we're going to run till approximately 7:35, 7:40, and then do audience questions. Please remain muted during our panelists' presentations and conversation. You may type your questions into the chat as soon as you think of them, or save them until the entire presentation is over. We will take questions one at a time in the order as we see them. We ask that you remain respectful of one another during the discussion. We reserve the right to remove anyone who does not follow these guidelines. Everyone in attendance will automatically receive the video in their email. PowerPoint links, PowerPoint slides can also be made available upon request. Next. Land acknowledgement. Our Janesville League has been working diligently on a land acknowledgement statement. We are not quite there yet. So I wanted to find an article that would help us know how to go about it and what is really important. I found a great article in Audubon magazine from the summer of 2021. And it was written by Bradford Kasberg. And he lives in Chicago and is a citizen of the Miami tribe of Oklahoma. At first, he was very skeptical about land acknowledgements, thinking, well, it's just a waste of time. What's really going to happen for us? However, the more land acknowledgements became, something that people are doing, he realized that maybe it can really chip away at the dominant narrative of manifest destiny by stating the simple truth. No, back.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I hit it.
No, back. I mean, forward now. Forward.
Yeah, sorry. Forgive me.
Yep. Land acknowledgements chip away at the dominant narrative of manifest destiny by stating the simple truth that indigenous peoples lived in and stewarded the landscape since time immemorial and continue to do so today. As long as they are precise in their identification of communities having a relationship with a specific land, they do not relegate communities to the past or patronize them. They outline strategies for building and maintaining relationships. Someone has, please mute yourself. They outline strategies for building and maintaining relationships with the tribes they've identified. And they recognize the land itself and not just the indigenous people. The point is here that if you tell the truth and you are being forthright about it in terms of not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, that is the most important thing. And today we are walking the walk. Next. Our presentation today is all about building sustainability. And this is a wonderful logo that I found online to really help people understand what all is involved in sustainability. It is much more complicated than people think. And therefore, you will find that our program tonight is also more complicated than maybe you expected. But that's okay. Have patience with yourself, and just you may need to view the video a couple of times to really start understanding what this is all about. Last year's program, we focused on environmental sustainability and the planet. And we heard from county governmental members, we heard from city staff, and school staff about their sustainability goals in Janesville and Rock County and where they were at. And so today we are focused on the people part of the sustainability equation here, and social variables dealing with the community, education, equity, social resources, health, well-being, and quality of life will be things we will be hearing from today. And next year, we will be focused on the economy. Next. Okay, we start by considering the global picture and where are we at with climate change today. So I am showing you here some of the findings from the most recent United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. It is their report from November 2023. And they tell us that the Paris Agreement did significantly help reduce emissions. However, and this is a big however, the IPCC report also states that the world is not on track to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement of keeping the average global warming at or below 1.5 degrees Celsius. From November 22 until October 23, the Earth actually experienced 1.32 degrees Celsius warming over the 1880 pre-industrial benchmark. So we are literally inching our way toward that 1.5 degree threshold. And in fact, during the month of September 2023, the globe, our beautiful planet, warmed 1.7 degrees Celsius. Therefore, for that month, we have gone beyond what is considered the threshold. And as we know from other reports, we know that the Arctic Ocean does not have much ice anymore. We know that the glaciers are melting very quickly. And we also know that permafrost is melting and releasing bacteria that has not been seen on the Earth for millions of years. Therefore, trillions of dollars are needed around the world to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And we need more effective international mutual cooperation. It is critical. We are not going to look at this YouTube video. However, I encourage you to do that at home at your leisure. It is all about the global climate situation. Next. In this presentation, we focus on the following themes. We focus on the globe first, low income, not first, but we focus on the globe and realize that those contributing least to climate change are actually struggling the most to protect themselves against climate-induced natural disasters. They don't have enough money to build sufficient resilience, nor do they have the funds to clean up and rebuild after a disaster occurs. And then in the United States, we're focused on both urban settings and rural in this presentation. Historically, BIPOC individuals have lacked freedom of movement and freedom of choice in the United States. And these 2 points are coming directly from Dr. Kirk E. Harris's presentation that he shared with me. He says, our common law history as well as our written laws were racialized. Local control was racialized through zoning and land use. FHA loans were created during World War II, but the underwriting manual said, quote, social and racial classes should stay consistent in neighborhoods or it could lead to instability, unquote. In other words, whites would be excused from engaging in instability if the races and classes did not remain in their designated spaces. The wave of Black veterans returning from World War II were excluded largely from the important FHA and VA opportunities related to home ownership, education, and occupational development. Highway infrastructure built after World War II ran through BIPOC communities, segregating families and destroying Black-owned businesses and communities. Quote unquote urban renewal policies after World War II created white flight. Communities of color more often than not were considered blighted, even if they were not actually blighted. Next. So, but we will learn in this presentation that there are many BIPOC individuals working with whites in our state, both in the urban setting and in the rural setting, to fight climate change and the historic injustices done to them. Systemic issues require changes in systems. Groups working on climate change and sustainability need to change their planning and practices in order to become fully sustainable for all humans and all living things on Earth. And we will also get the idea of how connected we all are. We are all connected to one another, humans, and we are all connected to every other living thing on the Earth, not only in our midst, but also around the world. Next. I want to welcome our esteemed panel. We are so fortunate to have this panel with us today. We have Christina Carvajal, is the founder and executive director of Wisconsin Eco Latinos, and she's also on the Sustainable Madison Committee and was named one of the 40 most influential Latino leaders in Wisconsin by Madison 365. We are hearing from Dr. Kirky Harris, at least vicariously. He is a member of the Department of Urban Planning, School of Architecture and Urban Planning at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Candace Owley is a League of Women Voters member from Milwaukee County, and she attended the COP28 in 2023. Nancy Ratana works with Clean Wisconsin as its Resilient Communities Program Director and chairs the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern Community Advisory Committee. Brian Vieg has worked in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Wisconsin State Legislature, various Wisconsin state agencies, and the Office of the Governor, is the Audubon Great Lakes freshwater policy expert for Wisconsin, and was named as one of the 40 most influential Indigenous leaders in Wisconsin by Madison 365. Welcome to you all, and thank you for participating with us today. Next. Dr. Kirky Harris gave us slides and also a video. We will not be playing the video tonight, but you can watch it at your leisure. It's only 4 minutes. And we were afraid to play this YouTube video because of all the ads that are also playing on there, and some might not be appropriate for our presentation or our audience. So, but he is all about democratizing urban and regional spaces through equity policies and practices, which will bring us closer to being what America promises to be. And he is not with us tonight because he is meeting with the Vice Chancellor of UW-Milwaukee in order to begin a Center for Equity in Planning and Practice on the campus of UW-Milwaukee. And we applaud him. We hope it all goes well tonight for him and for the center. We need that center, and hopefully those centers will spread across the state and nation, because this is what needs to happen in order to make the systemic change that needs to occur. Next. Nancy, it's your turn.
Great. Thanks, Susan and Lisa. Thank you guys for putting this together and for inviting me to be on the panel. Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Ratana, Resilient Communities Director with Clean Wisconsin. Just for those who aren't aware of Clean Wisconsin, this is a nonprofit advocacy organization that's been around since 1970. That's been working to ensure that to secure and protect the state's environmental heritage through legal action, policy advocacy, scientific research, and authentic community engagement. The mission of Clean Wisconsin is to combat climate change and pollution in our air, water, and land, and ensure that every Wisconsinite has a healthy community and healthy future. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, Lisa. So as I mentioned previously, I manage the Resilient Communities Program. The majority of my colleagues are based out of Madison. I myself and our Green Infrastructure Manager are located in Milwaukee, where the program currently focuses its efforts in. So the Resilient Communities Program works with to support local sustainability efforts, especially through the reduction of water pollution, fighting climate change, pursuing environmental justice in the city of Milwaukee, and improving overall environmental health through collaborations with local government offices and agencies like the City of Milwaukee's Environmental Collaboration Office, Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, but most importantly, through working with grassroots leaders and community members to ensure that we're centering the voice of those that are traditionally disenfranchised when it comes to the extreme effects of climate change. So as I mentioned previously, we lead with environmental justice efforts as well. So ensuring that, again, the fair treatment and the meaningful involvement of all people from all backgrounds have a voice and a say in these environmental decisions that these people were often excluded from. And we also seek to address and rectify the disproportionate environmental burdens and risks that these marginalized communities face. So the Resilient Communities Program, I've been with the organization for 1.5 years now. I have a background in parks and local government, and this program is really, it's been a really great opportunity to get to work at the community level. We manage a green infrastructure outreach and installation program focusing on Milwaukee's northwest side. In collaboration with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. So we do install small scale green infrastructure pieces to people's homes free of charge. So these are like rain gardens, rain barrels, and storm gardens. These rain barrels have a 50-gallon water capacity. Rain gardens are these gardens that are placed on a person's house that is comprised of native vegetation, native plants. The goal here, at least from MMSD standpoint, is to address concerns of stormwater management, specifically in the northwest side of Milwaukee. Back in 2008 and 2010, the residents of the area faced really extreme flooding events due to back-to-back 100-year flooding events that led to millions of dollars in infrastructure damage and also caused a casualty. So as a result of that, MMSD did a lot of comprehensive planning to address these stormwater management issues, but then at the same time, focus in on the need to get the residential buy-in. Oftentimes when we talk about how climate change exacerbates extreme weather events or just the term climate change. I know personally, like the term itself is so broad and oftentimes we don't think of it as it affecting you immediately. Because, regular people have bills to pay, high utility costs, there's violence, there's traffic issues or pedestrian safety issues. So stormwater management or flooding events that happen from time to time is not at least at the top of mind for folks. So incorporating that authentic community engagement and community buy-in is essential. So we've been partnering with MMSD for the last 10 years actually to do this green infrastructure work. Again, not only focusing on the installation piece of it all of stormwater management, but that authentic community engagement. And I'll give a shout out to our Green Infrastructure Manager, Ethan Taxman, who does a great job of attending neighborhood association meetings, attending outreach events on weekends and evenings, on engaging with residents on a personal level to ensure that residents are both educated, understand the purpose of these green infrastructure opportunities, but then also that we cater to and hear about their feedback and their commentary when it comes to climate change. We do a lot of other work around green infrastructure that incorporates both community feedback and buy-in as well. We have developed like a green infrastructure toolkit that other municipalities could use to model their green infrastructure efforts. I will say Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District is nationally, if not internationally, known for their stormwater management practices. And with the community outreach portion as well, it's been a very a point that a lot of other communities would like to replicate. So we were able to host various workshops with residents, municipal leaders, various stakeholders involved in the green infrastructure work, and how we can provide a toolkit for other municipalities to model. So that's the example of sharing best practices. So again, we range our work. We cannot do this alone. We engage with a variety of different stakeholders. Again, with community at the forefront. Milwaukee right now, it's in a really exciting time. Obviously, Milwaukee is known for years of, a lot of boots on the ground, authentic community outreach work when it comes to environmental justice and climate change efforts. But now there's actually like a really, there's funding, like a lot of funding coming to the city to support this effort. And there's a lot of like eyes on Milwaukee for this work. So we're excited to be a part of it and so work alongside other stakeholders in the area. I keep mentioning Milwaukee just because we're locally here. I do work whenever possible throughout other areas throughout the state of Wisconsin through Clean Wisconsin efforts. And the goal of the Resilient Communities program moving forward in the next couple of years is to obviously expand capacity and expand our reach to the rest of the state, that there are vulnerable communities all over the state. And we hope to continue to at least mimic or use the model of this community level approach among other communities, including Black and Brown communities, the tribal communities, traditionally disenfranchised communities in the face of climate change. We're all facing the aftermath of all of this. So if you could go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more. So right now, the EPA under the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has funded $450 billion for a sediment cleanup effort in the Milwaukee's area of concern. So there are three main rivers that flow through Milwaukee, the Menominee, the Kinnickinnick, and the Milwaukee rivers, that have been deemed extremely degraded due to years of pollution, channelization, just overall extreme pollution in the rivers that have led to this whole area as being deemed an area of concern per the EPA. So there's been years of planning, years of design, years of conversations with EPA, DNR, and local stakeholders like Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, Milwaukee County Parks, city parks as well, on strategies to do these large sediment habitat restoration projects within the area of concern in the Milwaukee area. Part of these areas of concerns, and you may see this in other areas of concern around the nation, are these community advisory committees, where these are committees that are set up. Typically, these are made up of volunteers that work to, again, just do outreach on the area of concern projects. And ultimately, they have the role, or at least in Milwaukee, our main mission is to help delist the area of concern to ensure that all of the various pollutants have been addressed through the restoration efforts. What's unique in Milwaukee is that the CAC is comprised up of, I think right now we have 8 people on it. We have a diverse group of people that we try to represent the different demographics of Milwaukee. We are all paid for our time to serve on this community advisory committee. And we work again to ensure that Milwaukee residents, especially those that have been traditionally excluded from these environmental decisions, play an active role in shaping the results of the area of concern delisting and the project planning and implementation. So what that means is we work really closely with both the project implementers, with DNR and the MMSDs, the EPAs of the world, to both facilitate the information transfer from the higher to the lower, or the low to high, but also we work to make sure that this information is translated in a way that any resident, any person can understand this information and can understand that there are opportunities for public input. There's public information sessions. There's opportunities for people to shape how they want their area of concern to look like in the future. So the CAC has been actively involved in working with these project implementers, but then also increasing our own community presence and launching a network of supporters of the CAC to, again, make sure that everyone is aware of opportunities to influence decision-making. And this goes back to the model of just pursuing environmental justice and equity and all of these crucial decision-making processes where oftentimes we were excluded, that led to obviously just exclusion. And then given like the history of Milwaukee being segregated and redlined, and being the most vulnerable populations are the ones that are most impacted or most affected by the pollution. So we have a lot of work to do, but again, it's been a really exciting time in Milwaukee where a lot of this work around climate change and environmental justice has really taken a focus on the people aspect first. Everyone is working towards working with community instead of doing to community. So I appreciate the change in the narrative, but obviously there's more work to come. And again, I'm excited to be a part of these really innovative opportunities here. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Next.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Cristina Carvajal.
Hmm?
I'm
Stove was on.
What's on?
You left the stove on.
Oh,
okay. As
Please
long as
mute
everyone is safe, we're fine. Again, so my name is Cristina Carvajal. I'm the founder and executive director of
one of the burners, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Can somebody mute him?
Are we good now?
I hope so. If,
Okay.
yeah, please mute yourself if you are not speaking. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go again. Cristina Carvajal, I'm the founder and executive director of Wisconsin Ecolatinos. Our organization is a non-profit organization. We focus on engaging Latino community in environmental conservation and climate change action. We have our mission, have several pillars. One is environmental literacy. We aim to educate the community on the science behind everything related to conservation. We do a lot of work bilingual. We offer educational workshops and opportunities in English and Spanish to eliminate the language barrier. And also, for us, it's very important to bring awareness of the impact of pollution on the communities, the health, the impact of pollution on health in the community. As we all know, it's been quite documented, low-income people, people in disadvantaged communities, and people of color is impacted by pollution at a higher rate. And this becomes an environmental justice issue too, which we advocate for. We sit on different committees, Madison Committee, Sustainability Committee, the Fishburne Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee, And we are always alert on making sure if there are issues that affect the community related to environmental hazards. We want to represent our community because we understand that many people just don't have the background. They may not have the time to engage in these issues when it's related to, decision making between the government and corporate entities and so on. As it is, for example, with the PFAS issue right now, the contamination of many water bodies and areas in Wisconsin with PFAS. And then we, of course, we engage in all these sessions advocating for the community. The other area that we consider very important is bringing opportunities for the community to take action on climate change. And talking about adaptation already, because our communities are going to be impacted by climate change at a higher rate. We're also advocate for the inclusion of Latino community and minorities in the transition to clean energy. Right now, there is so much investment with the, with IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, to move to decarbonize and to move towards electrification and clean energy. But we also we think this is good. This is a positive measure for and it will have a positive impact on the communities. But we also consider that it's important to include our communities in this transition, so they can receive the economic benefit as well as the health benefit. And as you had mentioned, environmental justice is complex. It involves many areas, and that is something that we want to address too. Next slide, please.
Oops,
Yeah, thank you.
sorry.
That was good. Yeah. So we do lots of community outreach. We go where the community is at. We work with in the South Central Wisconsin area. And we offer many educational opportunities for adults, young people too, but mainly adults that may not have the opportunity to be in an academic setting. And where these topics might not be, conservation and climate change and all these, it might not be right, at the reach. So we want to make it easy for them to learn. For example, we partnered with the Latino Academy of Workforce Development in Madison to offer a clean and awareness, air pollution awareness and monitoring campaign last year. That was pretty successful. We had a group of students that came to these workshops and learned, everything related to air pollution. And then after, we learned a lot about it, it led to installation of purple air monitor throughout Dane County. This was a very interesting. It had a very good impact in the community because it happened exactly at the same time when we had the fires from Canada last summer, and the air pollution was really bad. And the students saw these purple air monitors go real purple, which they are not supposed to go purple. They're supposed to be green. If you're not familiar with these monitors, actually, they're, let's say, a commercial type of air monitor that can be installed, anywhere. and then they're connected to the network through the internet, the Wi-Fi, you have to have Wi-Fi, and then they're connected to a network, and the measure, it measures particulate matter, 2.5, and it shows the numbers or the color depending on where they are the chart in a map. So people can go to the map in real time and see how the air quality in their area is. So this is kind of like the type of programs we do. It has a lot to do with community science. What we talk about, community science, because we're putting science in the hands of the average person in the community. We also have a program with the UW Arboretum that's happening right now, this spring and summer. But that one is related to storm water pollution prevention. And it has kind of like the same style. We do educational sessions, and then we do some kind of a community science project, which has turned out to be very engaging and successful for our community. Next slide, please. So I know I was talking about environmental justice and issues that affect the community. We had the opportunity to work with 350 Wisconsin, which is another environmental organization, on a analysis of something that it's impact, the community, and is energy burden. Energy burden is considered when someone has to pay more than 6% of their income on energy bills. And we found that low-income communities have a higher energy burden than others. And why is this an issue? Because, as we said, climate change is coming, and we're having extreme weather episodes. If we have a heat wave, and someone needs to keep their house safe and with the comfort of air conditioning, they're gonna have to pay more money for this air conditioning, more money on energy, spend more money on energy to keep their homes safe in these events. So what we found on this analysis is, particularly in the area, Janesville area, that 6%, the population in the low-income community in Janesville that is considered low income, which means that are below the 80% area median income, you have a 5% energy burden, which is higher than the average in Wisconsin, that is 3%. But then when you go lower to the extreme low income people, which is people that is at the 30% of the area income, area median income, they have a 13% energy burden. So basically they're paying, they are paying way more than the average people for energy. And this is the people that is extremely low income. And if you see in this graph, Janesville, we're talking about in Janesville of some 25,000 units, housing units, which is a lot. And then we're thinking, why would this be, right? This data comes from the US Census 2018. Of course, it will need to be updated. Numbers may be different now, but it will be around that, those numbers. One of the theories may be the older housing, if people, if the houses are older, they are not well weatherized, and energy is just not efficient. You know, the energy use is not efficient. And this, of course, it would be connected to energy efficiency is important because that way is one of the ways to reduce carbon emissions. So I think a great potential here to take action in this area in Janesville. And I hope, the government officials and community leaders pay attention to this issue. So this is, as we said, we work on advocating for the community. Climate action is important. Reducing energy emissions is important, and we're trying to find ways, to connect the community with resources that allow them to reduce their carbon emissions. That's kind of like a summary of what we have been doing lately. I think that's it. I don't think I have any other slides for now.
Thank you very much, Christina. Next. Now we hear from Mr. Brian Beeg.
All right. Hey everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm talking from my office / my kids' playroom. So but they're going to be very good about not making a lot of noise, I hope. So I guess we could.
Just a moment. Hang on.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Brian Bijou. I'm the policy director of freshwater for Audubon Great Lakes. We are a regional office of the National Audubon Society, and Wisconsin. I live in Madison, and have been working here for a while now, in and around the Capitol. So really appreciate the league inviting me to chat with everybody tonight. I think a lot of what I'm going to say is, I think, a much higher level, and probably less eloquently shared than the two speakers before me. But when you look at the impacts from specifically what I've been handling a lot lately is wetlands and the loss of wetlands and the resulting flooding. I think you're seeing a lot of the water problems that come along with the years of wetland loss that our communities have endured fall disproportionately on both people of color and people who people who don't have the sort of money to throw around, really, that tends to get things done in government. So while we are waiting for the slide, I can get started. So our main concern, Audubon is dedicated to the protection of birds and the habitats that they need to thrive. And so really a lot of the policy that we do revolves around wetland regulation, or protecting wetlands and habitat restoration. We would defend and advance state wetland regulations. There we go. We can go down to I think we can skip ahead because there's a few slides I'm going to be, we can go ahead to the one that says habitat restoration. Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, hang on.
Start the program. There you go.
I'm coming back. Just a second.
Good. We're good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we defend and advance state wetland regulations where we can. Regulations are really nothing more than. I'm sorry. What?
Nope. Now we're good. We're
okay.
Good.
Yeah. What regulations are really just what we need to implement the laws that we pass. So we want cost-effective regulations that work to protect water, air quality, and habitat. We also advanced state legislation that use wetlands to fight flooding. A major piece of legislation, and this is fantastic, that we worked really hard to pass, was just signed into law by the governor a couple of weeks ago. It's Act 65, and it would provide funding for local communities and tribal governments to restore wetlands in their area, to slow down and store water before it floods their communities. It passed the legislature unanimously, just frankly because it's innovative and cost effective in both protecting communities from flooding and enhancing really the vital habitat that we need. And lastly, we fight hard to secure state and federal funding for wetlands. Great Lakes populations of marsh birds have declined significantly over the last 3 decades, but thanks to wetland restoration, we see that wetlands are the only landscape where the bird population is increasing. Every other habitat has seen a decline. So wetlands are good for birds, fish, wildlife, and people. I think we can jump ahead to the state of Wisconsin wetland slide. Okay, so Wisconsin's lost 50% of its natural wetlands development since European settlement, most of which have been filled or drained to build towns, cities, roads, converted to land for agriculture, particularly in the southern part of the state. Then it's no surprise to people who know this stuff that in the last 10 years, Wisconsin has suffered roughly $365 million in property damage from flooding. According to a 2023 study, which compared and ranked the 8 Great Lakes states by flood readiness, Wisconsin fell in the bottom half compared to the other states. So Wisconsin hadn't been doing great, but a turning point really came in 2017 when developers at that time convinced the legislature to try to strip all state protections from wetlands. And what that did was that fight educated a huge number of people about how much wetlands do for their communities. Now, while at the time a watered down version of that bill did eventually pass, the overall policy fight really produced an amazing result. The level of public engagement that wetlands brought out, along with, you'll recall, the massive flooding which took place in northern Wisconsin, and really to a lesser extent around the state at that time, policymakers started to look at wetlands in a different way. So Audubon and really other fantastic groups like the Wisconsin Wetlands Association, who I used to work for, began educating lawmakers about how we can restore degraded wetlands to a more natural state, essentially just by moving the earth to restore the functions that those wetlands used to provide, which for flooding, it's to take and retain stormwater, allowing it to slowly drain off down the watershed, and slowing the flow of water into creeks and rivers, and thereby, sort of avoiding the huge rush of water that you get that causes so much damage when we're talking about flooding. So in the 6 years, keep that in mind, in the 6 years since that first wetland policy fight, Wisconsin passed Act 265, which I just talked about a minute ago, which will actually, give money to communities to use wetlands, to restore wetlands, to conserve wetlands, to protect protect themselves from flooding. We're a national organization, and I've talked to my policy counterparts in all the other states, and there is no other state in the nation that has done a complete 180-degree turn on wetland policy the way it has in Wisconsin. From 6 years ago, looking to completely abolish wetland protections in the state, to today, Wisconsin is on the forefront nationally in using their wetlands to protect communities, very specifically to protect communities from flooding. So, we got some good news. There's some good news coming down too. Okay, I think we can jump to the flooding. Okay, and what's been driving the conversation, the wetland conversation in Wisconsin is flooding. I think you can click on that video. That should play a video. Just give you a little bit of color there. So there's an organization called the First Street Foundation, which it does a lot of great work on flooding and studying issues around it. They did a study which examined the impact of flooding on population levels in areas that suffered from repeated flooding. Flood risk is really highly localized, and past research has shown that as awareness increases in an area about the fact that it gets flooded all the time, unsurprisingly, residents respond by moving to higher ground to protect their property investment. So as awareness of flood risk has increased, so did the uneven property value growth across neighborhoods, with high flood risk areas value growing much more slowly. And what happens is that when between 5 and 10% of properties are at risk of being impacted by flooding, that's when people start to move away from those risky areas. In this study, they studied over 800,000 census blocks in the US. And those census blocks are at a point where they've reached what's called, they've reached a tipping point. A critical number of their population has left that particular neighborhood or that particular community. And they become what First Street is called climate abandonment areas. And those areas nationally have already lost 3.2 million people due to flooding. And think about that, 3.2 million people have left areas that are repeatedly exposed to flooding damages. Okay, we can jump to the next slide. So just because you are in a neighborhood that doesn't flood, this, you might think this is an abstract problem. It's not. Flooding has a massive impact beyond the immediate dramatic ones that we typically see on the news. And I think this is something that policymakers really need to think about when they're talking about removing the wetlands that help us control the water in our landscape. As our population increases and there's supposed to be increased precipitation forecast for the Midwest, areas currently experiencing chronic flooding will also feel the impact of entire neighborhoods hollowing out. So what does that look like? It means a loss of representation in your government. As population shrinks and these neighborhoods and communities no longer qualify to send as many elected officials to city council, county board, state legislature, or even to Congress, it gets harder and harder for those residents to get their government to address their concerns. There are 316 federal programs that allocate funding based on the census. Federal grants, local grants, cost share programs, and tax credits for schools. I mean, the tax credits are all less available as people flee those communities. So you're looking at a loss of federal and state funding for schools, for hospitals, for roads, for public works, maybe even the public works that were supposed to be protecting you from flooding. And as we've seen time and again, and not just in a flooding context, when a community goes into an economic and population tailspin, there's a lot of associated problems with that. Again, we're talking about some of these climate abandonment zones this applies to that were impacted by flooding. As the study's seen, in those areas where we have these abandonment zones, we see an increase in substance abuse and crime rates. When neighborhoods start to get hollowed out, there's a lot more preventable events like car crashes, fires. People suffer more from unintentional accidents, and declining access to healthcare in those sort of communities brings about a risk rises in the rates of diseases that could be addressed by better healthcare, diabetes, tuberculosis, not to mention the individual and collective mental health issues that people suffer from the traumas of being, suffering from repeated flooding of their homes and their property. Aging and abandoned housing stock that's still there drops property values. The population drops and the workforce shrinks. Now there's not enough tax revenue to pay for public infrastructure, for law enforcement, for firefighters and other emergency first responders, schools, and on and on. So just because you might not get flooded in your community and other parts do, doesn't mean that you are not going to be impacted by flooding. I think we can jump to the public infrastructure. Oh, you can keep going. I think it's down a little bit more. There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So look at this picture. This picture is from flooding in northern Wisconsin in 2016, I believe. Look at the violent and damaging power that floodwaters can deliver. You can see there's no bridge there. There's no road that used to run on top of it. There's no guardrails. There's no bridge abutments. There's no wing walls. There's no piles or foundation blocks. I mean, the only thing there is this lonely looking box culvert, if you can see. So, 1 cubic foot of water weighs 60 pounds. On the Bad River, where this took place, a stream gauge on the Bad River rose from 300 cubic feet a second, which is normal, to, during the flood, a record peak stream flow of 40,000 cubic feet per second in only 15 hours. There's not a lot of infrastructure that can handle getting hammered like that during flooding. Okay, we can jump to private infrastructure. This picture was in Bayfield, Wisconsin. A lot of you might recognize that was Saxon Harbor. A lot of the damage that the flooding did in northern Wisconsin was to businesses was sort of focused on people's mind on what happened at Saxon Harbor, which was destroyed by the flooding. It's in Bayfield County. The Bayfield County supported 706 part-time and full-time jobs across various sectors of the tourism industry last year, and generated 7.6 million in state and local tax revenue. So you can just imagine, if you had damage to business infrastructure, the huge impact that it's going to have on that region. We can jump to the next vulnerable community slide. And would you be able to play that? That's a video. It's a short one.
That the priority has now shifted to helping out one another. There was a helicopter sent today. It landed in the casino parking lot. It was pretty dramatic, and 5 dialysis patients were loaded aboard and taken to Fresenius Medical Center in Ashland for dialysis. Flo says the community has shown an outstanding.
Okay, and like I mentioned, the two previous speakers have mentioned that the vulnerable communities are often the ones that are the most impacted when there's flooding events. This was coverage of the Bad River Tribe. They're located on the shores of Lake Superior in northern Wisconsin. The flooding literally it cut off roads that passed through the reservation, and these tribal members had to be airlifted out to receive medical treatment. Unless you had a 4-wheel drive vehicle, a boat, or you were willing to hike, it was going to be very difficult to leave the reservation until the flood waters had receded. Bad River suffered from having an infrastructure that wasn't resilient enough to handle the flooding. And it's the same for different reasons in communities around the world. People with means have the ability to build systems to keep water under control. Extensive stormwater and water treatment systems can take water from where it's not wanted and immediately send it away, which means usually sending it downhill. And that water keeps moving. Water goes downhill. It keeps on moving until it slows down or stops in a community, or I should say in a water body where it ends up, or it's going to slow down and stop in a community that can't afford to move that water away as quickly. So the water is still going to be stored in that community, but it's going to be stored in the streets. It's going to be stored in businesses. It's going to be stored in people's basements. And that's why vulnerable communities really get hit. And so, like I mentioned before, with the climate abandonment zones, the people who can move out of the way of the water do. The people that can't have to sit and deal with the consequences of that. So, as we've seen time and again, when a community goes into an economic and population decline, there's also a decline in a number of public health measures. There's an increase in substance abuse and crime rates. Again, the declining access to healthcare is a huge problem. The abandoned and aging housing stock drops property values, workforce shrinks, the tax base shrinks. These are all hurdles that these communities have to overcome, on top of what was already a history of disinvestment in the water systems that they had. To take it all back and to wrap up, we have the ability to use wetlands to hold on to water to protect our communities from flooding. I'm so grateful to Wisconsin for passing Act 265. Hopefully we can see that sort of policy approach being adopted nationally. I'm already trying to get the legislatures in the other states that I cover to copy Wisconsin in that regard. But that's a cost-effective way that it's much cheaper to help communities utilize the wetlands that they already have to control water than it is to try to get them funding to build gigantic water control structures that could do the same thing that a wetland can do. So that's it for me. So yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate it very much. And Brian also supplied us with resources as well that you can refer to when you receive the video and so forth. Next. Thank you. Yay. Thank you very much, Lisa. And now we're going to hear from Candace Owley. Candace.
Well, thanks, Susan. It's a great treat to be here tonight. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Some
Thank you so
troubles here.
much.
So everybody will be probably pleased to know there just appears to be one slide. I haven't learned my PowerPointing yet. So I want to thank Susan for creating something. I promise you, if I come back next year, I'll have beautiful pictures along with words. So, and I won't take as long, but I want to talk a little bit about what's actually called COP. And tell you, first of all, because this is a league program, I think it's really exciting to know that the League of Women Voters has been involved with UN programs back into the 40s, even with the creation of the United Nations. And they began having what's called an observer program, first with observing the negotiations around the status of women. And then when the climate the climate talks began, they were invited to be observers at the climate talks. And so for many years now, they've had the ability to have observer status. And I say that because it's a very special status. It means you can go in and be in the room where the negotiations are happening, and then you can directly talk to your representatives and you can caucus with the other observers. So this is really a wonderful thing, an important thing that I like people to know about the League of Women Voters. So if I asked 10 people, maybe one might have some clue of what COP is. If I said I went to COP 28, they'd go like, okay. Doesn't mean much to people, but yet it is a crucial global meeting. It is the only global meeting at all where all these countries, 197 countries, do come together to take on the issue of climate. Now, it's interesting that it was started in '92, as you can see here on this slide, and it was called the climate problem. They hadn't yet called it a climate crisis, and now it's like a climate catastrophe, and we can't find the words anymore to add on to this. But these countries came together, and in our country, we had Governor George H.W. Bush, and they ratified a convention that said that they would work together on this climate problem. And they ratified each of these 197 countries, including our own. We couldn't do this again probably in our lifetime, for all I know. But it was amazing that Congress ratified what was called the convention. And so the people who ratified, the countries that ratified this climate convention became the parties called the Committee of the Parties, abbreviated to COP. So nobody even goes to COP knows what COP stands for anymore. But a lot of people kind of became aware of the COP because, first of all, there's a lot of reporting that comes out. And Susan listed one of the main things, which is right before the meeting, there's this scientific report that tells us how we are doing in in the world with climate. And so a lot of the good thing, of course, it's a very good thing because there's huge numbers of reporters, and they are reporting back to all their countries about what is taking place here. But in 2015, it was in Paris. And in Paris, they reached for the first time, all these many countries reached an agreement that they needed to have to take a position that we should not increase global warming beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade over what it was in pre-industrial times. And again, Susan talked about where we are now in that, which we are already, we're supposed to stay below that. And, there's a lot of, the damages increase almost exponentially as we go above this global warming number. But if you might, so that was in a lot of the papers. And then people became aware of it because President Bush announced that he was pulling out of that when he came. And in some ways, you don't really pull out. You may not attend, but we didn't unratify the convention. But then President Biden announced that he was going to re-engage around the COP process. And John Kerry became the emissary, who was our representative, our top representative at the climate talks. It's important to think about COP as the fact that it is a UN, an extension of the UN, and the UN operates by consensus. So 197 countries have to reach consensus. So this creates enormous frustration because a whole number of countries want more to be done. But, you're bringing together the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, but you have China and Russia and Saudi Arabia. And so I would say that it's probably a miracle that they reached some kind of an agreement. So what happened at this COP was that they, you could see here we had the largest COP ever. The year before was in Egypt, and they had about 50,000. And this year we had 83,000 or more. People think it's actually over 100,000, maybe 104,000, something like that, 197 nations. And there was a lot of focus on the fact that there was about 2,000 fossil fuel delegates there. But, out of 100,000, 2,000, that means 98,000 were not. And they were from indigenous communities, they were from small island communities, they were from all kinds of communities. So huge numbers, and they were from, of course, the League of Women Voters. So the outcomes that people talk about primarily is that it was the first time actually in 28 years, if you think about it that way, where they reached an agreement in their negotiations that all countries agreed that we need to transition the global economy away from fossil fuels. They actually made those statements, even all of the big petrochemical countries, and even Bill McKibben, who's a very well-known climate writer and climate activist, said that he felt this was a positive step because it puts it really states out that we all in all of our countries need to be taking actions and supporting campaigns to end fossil fuels. The other thing that was accomplished was the agreement to triple renewable energy by 2030 and to halt all deforestation and forest degradation by 2030. There was also the establishment in the previous COP of something called a loss and damage fund, but there was no money in it. And that fund is for the rich countries to put money in to help the countries that Susan mentioned, which are the ones that aren't really, they're the small island countries, they're a lot of the African countries, they're not the contributors, but they feel the greatest damage. And so this is a fund to help offset that. They began by putting in, numbers of millions of dollars, but it's far, far, far short because we need billions of dollars. So it's far short of what's needed. And so a focus of COP28 will be the continued putting money into this fund to help with these damages. Of course, if we did more, we wouldn't need as much money in damages. But there you have it. So another thing that was announced there that is wasn't an agreement of COP, but was important from our standpoint, is that the United States announced at that moment that the EPA was going to set new standards for methane. And methane is the second most abundant greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide, responsible for a quarter of the warming, which a lot of people don't know because we talk about CO2 a lot, but methane is huge. And the head of the Environmental Defense Fund, which is a nonprofit, advocacy group, said that that was the most impactful climate rule the United States has ever adopted in terms of addressing climate. Other things that we accomplished were, it was the first ever health day. Again, it's because it is now quite clear that the climate crisis is now the biggest threat to health, the health of humanity. And over 100 countries, for the first time ever, sent their top health ministers to the event, and they signed this declaration, and the message was clear that climate change is killing us, urgent action is needed, and we want to, and it's really important for all of the polar bears, and not to degrade that, but it's really important to see that we have children dying from asthma and respiratory diseases because of climate change. And we believe that if you put the human face on climate, that's when you start to get action around climate. There was something called just transition, which is a huge issue. It's kind of a kitschy term, but it is actually a huge issue. It was part of the recent auto workers strike. And this is the idea that as we move from fossil fuel jobs to renewable and green jobs, there's going to be massive job displacement. There's going to be a lot of jobs created in all of the new industries, but there's going to be huge jobs lost in our historic industries. And we have to have a way to handle this transition. And the jobs created, which are supposed to be significant, are not necessarily going to be in the same city, in the same community, or in the same occupations, or for the same rate of pay. And so I will say that President Biden and his people who were there made this a top priority. This is the most pro-union president we've ever had. So he is very much focused on this issue, because otherwise you get massive resistance from workers and to changes that you just have to watch some of the things going on even in our state right now. Finally, I wanted to touch
Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I don't necessarily understand this slide because I didn't write that one, but
No, please.
but thank you, Sue. But I will say, I wanted to just say also, because I think it's important, that there was a declaration for the first time ever on sustainable agriculture and resilient food systems. And if it made a declaration that there's a right to adequate food to ensure safe and sufficient food for everyone, and to adapt the food systems. And next year will be the first time that they put in place. So they established a goal this year, and next year, or really the end of 29, they will for the first time be holding, measuring countries in their progress towards this goal about sustainable agriculture and resilient food systems. So, Susan has some stuff here, but I would end that by saying that, I think COP has flaws. As I said, it's a voluntary system, and it is which means there's a consensus to the goals, but each country has their own voluntary goals. There is not an enforcement mechanism, and that frustrates many. But it's important, I think, to know that as we understand that this is an important part of the whole fight on to save our planet, that the COP really won't save the world. It's up to every country and every individual. And at some level, we still ourselves in our own behavior and in our own communities, still it's kind of too easy to jump in our gas burning cars and eat a good hamburger and so on. It's very hard to change our own behavior, but it's up to us to really fight in our own state and in our own country to hold them accountable to get to net zero by 2050. And
Thank you very much. Yes.
It is true that the chair of the conference made this comment, but but it was more important is that the agreements were reached, and there's a reporting that will take place each and every time. So, okay, great. I think I probably will go again this year. It's in, God help us, Azerbaijani, another petrochemical place. But then after that, it'll be in Brazil. So maybe a little bit more climate friendly atmosphere by that time. So thanks, Sue, and thanks everybody for inviting me.
You bet. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you attended this event because it is major and there were some important things that happened. However, the points I wanted to make here on this slide were that, but wait, the president of the summit actually did some greenwashing while he was there, which means he's not, completely up to being forthright. And also, I mean, there was a lot of tension between the wealthier countries and the developing countries because of the money. And the UAE and Germany and the EU pledged a total of $770 million to get it started. The United States did not pledge any money, and that's because we're not really functioning well in our own country, and so naturally we could not pledge.
We did
However,
actually, we pledged 17 million, which was an embarrassment.
it is an embarrassment.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
that's
But it has to
payment-
get through Congress, so.
well, and
Right.
we need trillions, yes.
Really
And
good.
I just wanted to alert everyone to the fact that right now, Southern Africa is undergoing extreme drought. They've declared a national disaster, and neighboring countries as well, Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, Angola, Mozambique, and Madagascar are also affected. So that is a huge world problem. And again, those people, the most vulnerable, are suffering the most. Next slide.
That's it.
So as we said, we have focused on not only the globe, where we found that lower income countries, those with the most vulnerable people, are struggling the most to protect themselves. They don't have the money to build sufficient resilience, and they certainly don't have the funds to clean up and rebuild after a natural disaster. Same thing with all of the vulnerable populations and the BIPOC individuals in our own country as well. The BIPOC individuals never had freedom of choice or movement of where to live. However, and now they have been living in areas, they've had to live in areas that were highly industrialized and suffered the most air and water pollution. Next slide. And of course, we were introduced to wonderful BIPOC individuals who are running nonprofits and who are working with the government to make things better for all of us. And we were very happy to hear from them. They are working very hard. They are working with white people, and we need to all join together. And they are making systemic changes as well as just affecting individuals. Groups working on climate change and sustainability need to change the way they do community planning and development and their practices in order to become truly sustainable, so that we can all survive, all humans, and most of the diverse species, living things on Earth. Yes. Next slide, please. Action. Okay. We were talking about action. I'm glad so many of you did say that. What I want all individuals to start doing, not the people on the panel, you're already doing more than most. However, individuals who think they are doing enough, they haven't been doing much at all. So please, I challenge you to pledge 5 hours per week to fighting climate change. And I don't think that's too much to ask. It's very similar to the pledge, 5 hours a week or 5 hours, whatever, to put your phone down and get outside or do something else. And this is the same thing. And we need that effort. We need more effort from everyone. And also, there are plenty of opportunities for you to stand up and interrupt those who are disrespecting BIPOC individuals in our midst. Please state what the person did that was inappropriate, did or said inappropriately, then teach them what to do appropriately. Use it as a teachable moment. And those of you who are in a governmental position where planning and practice are done, please, you need to ensure that BIPOC individuals who will be affected by the plans and the development are at the table advising the process. So, I mean, we really had to start late because people were late at getting in. But I do thank you so much, all of you, for attending. I want to thank you, the panelists, so much for participating, because your presentations were so interesting. And I want for all of the individuals who need to pledge 5 hours a week, I want you to either join one of these individuals' activities, one of their nonprofits, or please join a governmental committee, Rock County Committee, Janesville Committee, City of Janesville Committee, what have you. Get involved at the state level by getting involved with the Public Service Commission. And there's all kinds of nonprofits around. If you want more resources, I am happy to supply it all the time. If you want the PowerPoint as well as the video, please email me. I will get you that PowerPoint right away so you can see those videos that we didn't get to see. But anyway, thank you so much for attending. And Lisa, we have a meeting, right? An in-person meeting that people can come to?
Yes, we've secured the lower garden level at the Premier Bank. And it's the last Thursday or Wednesday, just a second. Keep talking, I gotta double check because we went back and forth on the dates. It's in June,
think it
we'll
was-
send out invitations to it, but it's just a round table, meet and greet, kind of get some ideas and maybe share committees that are in our local government that we may want to start attending and kind of step up our game.
Absolutely. And maybe start one of those advisory committees like Nancy is involved with. And please, the contact information is in this PowerPoint. Lisa, please just roll through some of the bios so that people can see that we have complete bios on everyone. And we also have contact information on all of our wonderful panelists. They are amazing people. If you have questions, I mean, we really don't have time now for the Q&A like we anticipated. However, if you want to contact these people, please do. They are happy to talk with you and get you involved in their organization and hook you up with, what you can do to help our BIPOC individuals.
And back to that date, it's June 26th, starting at 6 p.m., however long it, maybe an hour and a half, just to kind of get to know some local people that are interested in doing some work. And we'll send out an invitation and publicize it as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody. This was fabulous information.
It really was wonderful. And yeah, so thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice
Just wanted to plug Earth Day on Monday. So if you're looking for activities, I know Eco Latinos is hosting events and a lot of river cleanup events in Milwaukee as well, with Sturgeon Water Walk. So check in with your local environmental agencies to participate. And thank you for inviting us.
Anybody else have anything else they want to share?
Yes, yes. Nancy said we have our big event, Bilingual Environmental Conservation Fair this Saturday at Elbert Park, Madison from 11 to 2 p.m. We're going to gather more than 15 organizations with lots of information and resources around environmental conservation, clean energy, and environmental justice.
Great. Hope
Thank
to
you so
meet
much.
you
I'll
in
be there.
person.
I'll be there, Christina. Thank you. Yep, and
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
for inviting us.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Susan.
inviting me. Thank you. Well done, Susan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.